went on a cross-country RV trip this past spring with my friend Melissa, her 7 kids, and 2 young German shepherds. We started in West Virginia, and we weren't off to a great start. The water lines broke the night before, so we had to rely on water jugs the whole trip. The gas cap was busted, so it was a nightmare to get off. Tires had good tread, but a couple were pretty old, so they worried me. We found out the aux batteries were bad, so we needed to jump the RV every time we stopped. Driving through Colorado Springs, we blew a spark plug and had to stop for repairs. Luckily, her brother, who used to be a diesel mechanic, was traveling with us, so it only took a day to fix. Regardless, we were still having a great time seeing the scenery, stopping at landmarks and national parks like Garden of the Gods, Mesa Verde, the Grand Canyon, and Yellowstone. After Yellowstone, we had to leave the west entrance since the roads on the east and south hadn't been opened yet. We drove up into Montana, and for some reason her brother insisted on getting off I-90 onto a 2-lane highway through the Crow and Northern Cheyenne reservations. He was perpetually driving an hour ahead of us because his RV was faster and he's a bit of a reckless guy, but we didn't want to be too far from him in case we ran into engine trouble again, so we really didn't have a choice but to follow him. We found ourselves taking the ramp to Route 212, had just gotten to the Crow Reservation, and stopped to gas up. Immediately, things just felt odd. It's past 10 p.m., and as I'm pumping gas, I'm hearing children running around, playing off in the dark, and cars kept driving up slowly to check us out. I get back in and Melissa's already saying, "Get us out of here, it's so creepy." We haul off down the 212 in pursuit of her brother. There's just nothing out here but inky black skies, long desolate roads, and sporadic groups of 4 or 5 houses every few miles. I'm acutely aware that we lost cell service as soon as we got on that highway, so I'm just praying that nothing goes wrong. I try to ignore the feeling that someone's watching us. Her dogs start whining in their cages. The feeling of unease has continued, and I don't want to stop, but Melissa says that we need to let them out to poop, or we'd just be cleaning up the mess. I pull over next to a big field, and she gets her oldest daughters to leash them. I throw open the door and let them out. As soon as they hit the grass, the 2 German shepherds see something out in the darkness and start going absolutely crazy. They're barking and straining against the leash, and the girls are struggling to control them. My blood pressure spikes. I look over at Melissa, and she looks completely bewildered. I reach up to the overhead compartment and pocket my handgun. We get the girls and the dogs back in the RV and peel off down the highway again, cognizant of the fact that we're probably going to have to clean up after the dogs since they wouldn't potty outside. They're back in their cages and continuing to whine. We drive for another 30 minutes or so, and they're still whining. And Melissa says we really need to stop again to let them go outside. This is the last thing I want to do, because the whole time, I feel like something's watching us. And the only thing that's running through my head is all the scary stories I've read about evil spirits, wendigos, and skinwalkers. And I reason with myself that I'm just scaring myself, and they probably smelled a fox or a coyote or something. And I really don't want to clean up dog poop from the cages on the side of a forgotten highway using jugs of water in the dark. We pull over again, and this time I take my gun with me. We walk outside with the girls as they take the dogs out. I distinctly remember thinking, I don't know what good a gun will do against an evil spirit, but I'm not going down without a fight. The moment their paws hit the ground, they immediately start howling and barking into the darkness again. The hair on the back of my neck stands up. I say, "Girls, get the dogs back in the RV. We're getting the hell out of here." But her dog Hazel is straining so hard at the leash, she can't get her inside. So I pick up this German shepherd in both my arms and heave her through the door and run inside. As I lean out to pull the door closed, I think to myself, this is the moment where something with sharp claws grabs my arm and pulls me into the night. The dogs go back in their cages and continue whining. I jump back in the driver's seat and gun it down the road, and Melissa leans over and says in a panic whisper, "What's going on out here? Didn't you feel it? Am I crazy, or does something feel wrong?" I glance at her and remember one of the big no-nos of skinwalker lore. You don't talk about them. You don't even think of them, if you can help it, because it draws their attention to you. I say, "No, you're not crazy, but I can't talk about it right now." I feel it too. But just trust me. We can't talk about it right now. As I'm cresting a small hill on the highway, I look over to her and say, just trust me here. We'll talk about it later, okay? But we can't right now. I look back ahead, and there's an enormous white rabbit standing on its back legs in the middle of the road. Looking back now with the benefit of a cool head, I'm sure it was just a bit bigger than normal, but I'm telling you in that moment, it looked huge, like 3.5 feet tall. I swerve the 37-foot RV around the beast, and thankfully keep control. I put the pedal to the metal and say I'm sorry, I don't care what the dogs do in their cages. I'm not stopping again, and I don't. I'm commuting to work in a different city, and I'm working third shift, 7 p to 3 a. Hate those hours. Hate the drive home, but the pay's solid. I get out of work after my Saturday shift, and now it's 3 a.m. on Sunday morning of Halloween. As I'm getting on the highway, I realize it's Devil's Night, and I'm just glad to be on the highway and out of the city center without any traffic, drunks, or cops. Now, I live in the Midwest, and that is the worst time of year to be driving at night around here. Deer are running through and acting all kinds of stupid, and gun season hasn't opened up yet to call their numbers. There have been deer carcasses scattered all over the highway for the past few weeks, so I'm driving super careful. I have my cruise control on, and I'm barely going the speed limit. About 22 minutes into my drive, 2 sets of headlights overtake me a few minutes apart. The first just keeps going, and becomes a set of taillights ahead of me. I relax a bit, as now I have someone in front of me to hit the deer for me. I affectionately refer to it as having a fallback. Once this car is a good way in front of me, I speed up a little, as I know I don't have to be paranoid. That's when the second set of headlights overtakes me. Except they don't. They were about to pass me, but they just end up sitting in my blind spot for about a mile in the other lane. I realize I sped up a bit as they were trying to pass me, and I hit my decelerate button for my cruise control twice so they can finish passing me. Except they don't. A run-down black Jeep pulls up next to me, matching my speed. Their cabin light was on, but their windows were so fogged up I couldn't see anything. I thought it was a bit weird that they were driving side by side me, but didn't really put any extra thought into it. I hit the decelerate button again, and eventually they pulled past me. The Jeep never changed lanes, and eventually caught up with the first car that had passed me. And I watched from a mile back as both sets of headlights drove on in front of me, side by side. At first I was really happy, because hey, extra metal in front of me to hit the deer. Then I realized how weird the whole situation was. At this point, I was doing about 75, because I was trying to keep the distance between us small enough that the deer weren't likely to run into the road between us. It was weird, but it was getting me home faster, so I wasn't complaining. Then the first car to pass me hits his brakes and pulled into a rest area. I was bummed, because it meant I needed to slow down. It meant some extra time to get home. But hey, better than hitting a deer and needing a tow. As I'm slowing down, I realize that I'm still pretty rapidly catching up to the Jeep that was matching my speed earlier. I don't feel like involving myself in the weirdness again, so I back off my cruise control some more. Except, I'm still catching up to it. I look down and I've slowed down to about 55. And I'm still gaining on the car that was a mile ahead of me doing 80 not a minute ago. Every warning bell in my brain goes off at once. I reach back to make sure that the bat that I keep in the back of my seat was free and easy to grab, and I turn the cruise control off. I had no idea what kind of weird psycho stuff I've suddenly found myself in, but I'm ready to drive like hell to get away. It was at this moment, it clicked to me, that the car that turned in the rest area probably did so because the Jeep was creeping them out, and they were trying to get away. After about another 30 seconds, I finally catch up to the Jeep, and I'm only going 50 or so. They're still in the left lane, right as I'm about to pull even with their passenger window. I gun the engine and shoot past them. There's an interchange for a major interstate route in a few miles, and a few miles past that, there's a way station where there's usually a state trooper or two hanging out. As I'm debating my options about which is the best to take, the Jeep goes flying past me. This time, he keeps going, and eventually I lose track of which taillights were his, when he gets mixed up with some semis a few miles later. I don't know what the hell that was. Was someone drunk and just not paying attention? Was someone trying to spook people out on Devil's Night? Or was it some psycho out on the highway looking for something particular? I have no idea, but I was shook the rest of the ride home. I was driving from Oregon to California with my young daughter to visit my family over the long holiday weekend. We messed around and ended up driving the last stretch really late at night. It was a dark, moonless night, and the road was completely deserted. I turned on my high beams to see the road better, and traveled with them on for quite some time before I came upon the first vehicle in miles, an old beat-up pickup truck driving in front of me. I was tired, so it did take me a couple minutes to remember I had my high beams on still. I quickly turned them off, feeling bad, even though it had only been a couple minutes, and there was still quite a bit of distance between our vehicles. After a few minutes, the pickup pulled off to the side of the road, and as I passed, I noticed what appeared to be a lone male driver. As soon as I passed him, he immediately pulled up behind me and got right on my bumper and turned on his high beams. At this point, I wasn't too worried yet. I figured he was just a jerk who would show me, have his little revenge, and then go around me and flip me off. But that's not what happened. Mile after terrifying mile, he stayed right on my bumper with his high beams blinding me. We were in a long, dark section of road, miles from the nearest town, and I had no cell service. My daughter had woken up from the high beams and started to cry just as we were entering a treacherous stretch of narrow, two-lane road with sharp curves and steep cliffs. I hoped that he would realize at this point he was now doing a very dangerous thing, but he continued and wouldn't let up at all. I was scared out of my mind and felt trapped. There was no way I could pull over on that deserted road, and no way I could lose him in the dark, winding road with my daughter in the car. I was white-knuckling the steering wheel, terrified. At any minute, he was going to try and force me off the road, or I was going to miss a corner and crash. Finally, after about an hour, we came to the first small town. It was only another 30 minutes to my destination, but I didn't want this guy to follow me to our hotel, so I exited, and he exited right behind me. He turned off his high beams, so I thought maybe this was his destination. I took some turns to appear that I knew where I was going, and thought I had lost him, so I headed back to the highway, and then as I glanced in my rearview mirror, he was right behind me, on the ramp, and he raced back up to my bumper and flipped his high beams on again. At this point, my heart was pounding so hard that I really started to think maybe this guy's intentions were to hurt me, and I was desperately trying to recall where the police station was in my hometown, so I could drive there if necessary. Then I realized with great relief, I finally had cell service, so I held my lit-up phone in the air hoping that he would see it and get the message loud and clear. And then I slowed down to call 911. The road-raging psychopath immediately took the next exit off the highway. I was a mess at this point, barely able to explain the situation to the 911 operator, who kindly offered to send me someone to look for him. I didn't have a plate or even a definitive vehicle color, so I declined. But I said I'd call back if I saw him again. When we got out of the car, I was shaking so badly that I could barely walk. This is definitely one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me.